2023 is coming to an end. I know, it's somehow true. It flew past in a hurried blur, and now it's over, with time marching ever forward. My job is to talk about video games and my opinions of them on the internet, and as such, it's expected that this time every year, I need to crown my #1 very best video game that released in the past 12 months. I'm going to try and do that today, but here's the thing. I loved a lot of video games this year, and it kind of feels like a disservice to pit the games I loved most against each other, when I could just hold a bunch of them up as things that I think anyone who shares my taste in games should probably try playing. So, I've picked my 15 favourite games of this year, and I'm going to give them each an award. Some of them are going to be incredibly specific and niche awards, but this is my awards show, so what I say goes. Will I crown an ultimate winner at the end? Perhaps. But if you asked me on a different day, my answer to that question would probably differ. All 15 of these games were things that I played this year, that I thought were great, and I'm here to spend some time convincing you that you ought to give them a try too if they seem up your alley. Best 2022 game that I played in 2023. Dave the Diver. So yeah, I know this is meant to be a 2023 Game of the Year list, but I got to this game late and I wanted to give it a nod that I think it deserves. Dave the Diver is a pixel art game about Dave, a man who enjoys diving and eating sushi. Through a series of events in which his optimism and good nature are taken advantage of, Dave ends up living a double life, diving and catching fish during the day, and running a sushi restaurant every evening. Every in-game day starts with Dave diving for fish, catching a wide variety of creatures, managing an oxygen meter to explore for longer, upgrading his equipment to delve deeper, and bringing as much fish and other assorted materials to the surface as possible. Over time, the daytime phase evolves to include options like farming, photography side quests, and seeking out specific fish for upcoming events with big-budget clients. In the evenings, you prepare a menu, hire staff, and rush back and forth delivering meals, pouring drinks, and clearing up empty plates in a frantic management minigame. Dave the Diver's core gameplay loop is really engaging, but for me, it was the way that the game constantly drip-fed new gameplay mechanics and narrative elements that kept me hooked. Every couple of in-game cycles there was something new to do, or some new revelation about the game's world, eventually expanding into this big quest to save an underwater merfolk race from extinction. While I appreciate the game including an option to change button-mashing QuickTime events to a button hold, the game unfortunately leaves other types of QuickTime events, such as stick-waggling, without options to avoid them. Clearly the intent to be more accessible was there, but it falls a little short in execution. The game has gorgeous pixel art animated cutscenes and a lot of emotional heart. I couldn't put it down, and I really do see why it was so hyped last year, when I really should have gotten around to playing it. Better late than never, I guess. Best game that appeared out of nowhere. HiFi Rush. I don't think I've ever felt as strongly about a game being Game of the Year material as early in the year as I did with HiFi Rush. Surprise revealed and released during an Xbox showcase in late January, HiFi Rush is a music rhythm character action game in which you play as Chai, a man who gets an iPod Touch accidentally implanted into his chest, which grants him the power to see and feel music flowing throughout the world. He's labelled as a defect by the ruling class, and goes on a musical adventure to try and overthrow an equally musically inclined series of over-the-top boss fights. The game features an exaggerated anime art style that looks gorgeous in motion, a combat system that flows incredibly satisfyingly, and a soundtrack where boss fights either feature well-selected licensed music, or alternatively an incredibly strong selection of original songs to ensure that streamers don't get a subpar experience when playing in streamer mode. HiFi Rush was one of my favourite games released in 2023, and given the game's surprise release status, it was a pleasant surprise to see the game's fairly robust accessibility setting support at launch. The game featured customizable subtitles, colour alteration options for colourblind players, multiple difficulty modes, and options to reduce the need for multiple or varied inputs in combat. Players could use the auto-action setting to press a single button on the beat in combat to execute an optimal attack combo, or use the single key rhythm optimizer setting to ensure that no in-game actions require two buttons to be simultaneously pressed. Lastly, and perhaps most impressively, HiFi Rush had some really creative ideas about rhythm visualization. Players could turn on an optional beat visualizer at the bottom of the screen, but this was often not needed. Elements of the game world regularly pulsed and moved in time with the beat, and your floating robot cat companion could be customized to show a regular beat visualizer near the player during combat, making following the beat via visual cues impressively viable. HiFi Rush is exaggerated anime nonsense, and as over the top as it was exactly my jam. I kept playing beyond the credits, and I've already replayed it a couple of times since its release. I'm just that into it. HiFi Rush's release was a surprise in many regards, including the game's accessibility support options. HiFi Rush is fantastic. It might be my favourite new IP from a big publisher that came out this year. It's wonderful. Best game where my eyes shot down enemies. Res Infinite, PSVR 2. When the PSVR 2 released in February of 2023, I spent a lot of time playing through as much of the headset's launch library as possible. A lot of available titles were existing VR favourites displayed in higher resolutions, with the main new original title being a first-person game set in the Horizon open-world setting. However, it wasn't the system's first-party exclusive that most caught my attention during that launch lineup, but the PSVR 2 port of Res Infinite that truly made my first days with the headset feel pretty magical. I know that Res Infinite isn't a 2023 game, but the PSVR 2 port of it is, and that's specifically what's getting this Game of the Year award, so it counts. The PSVR 2 features eye-tracking technology, mostly used to support something called foveated rendering, where games render at a higher resolution where you're looking, and a lower resolution in your peripheral vision. That tech is cool, but in the kind of way where it's cool because you never notice it's happening. Res Infinite is a game in which you shoot down low-poly spaceships in first person. I say first person, kind of third person, first person perspective in VR of a third person character. And the PSVR 2 version of the game allows players to aim their targeting reticle using the PSVR 2's eye tracking. This was the game in the PSVR 2 launch lineup that felt like magic to play. As someone with a coordination disability that makes rapid and precise stick movements difficult, being able to simply aim at enemies by glancing at them with my eyes was a revelation. I could target enemies basically as quickly as I could acknowledge their existence. I felt in tune with a video game in a way I don't think I ever have done before or since. The layer of conscious input execution that usually stands between me and my gaming melted away. It felt unreal. Res Infinite is a simple on-rails shooter, but something about being able to use my eyes to target enemies really stuck with me. I'd love it if more games worked like this. I can't say strongly enough how much it impacted me to play. Best use of VR to make me cry. Before Your Eyes. Okay, yes, this is another game that was released before 2023, but yet again, the 2023 release is uniquely special, so that version's getting an award. This is my list, I cannot be stopped. Before Your Eyes is a game in which you experience someone's life in the form of flashbacks. Stories re-examined in first person while sitting on a boat to the afterlife. It's a story-heavy adventure lasting a couple of hours, and one that succeeds based on its unique control scheme. Before Your Eyes is a game in which, anytime you blink, you might jump forward through time. Meant to mimic the ways that memories are fleeting, and life often seems to jump forward in increasingly rapid leaps, Before Your Eyes makes every moment of its narrative feel important and worth treasuring by emphasizing how fleeting a moment can be. Moments in life are hard to hold on to tight, and a beautiful memory you hope to hold close often isn't one you can hold on to forever, no matter how hard you try. While Before Your Eyes has been out for a few years now, the game never really worked for me before 2023. The game was playable on PC using a webcam to track blinks and eye movements, but it never really worked reliably enough for me to get sucked into the experience. With the release of the game's PSVR 2 port, that really did change. Not only were my eye movements and blinks accurately tracked, but the world of the game filled my entire frame of vision. Before Your Eyes is a wonderful game, but it's something else in a good eye-tracking VR headset. Experiencing a beautiful day on the beach with your mother as a young child, seeing the sunset turn the horizon a range of wonderful colours, then, in an instant, you blink and everything you saw is gone, and it's months later, and you're in a different room, having lost that moment forever, is disorienting, and heartbreaking, and incredibly impactful. Before Your Eyes is a game that, on PSVR 2, really made me fight to resist the urge to blink, lest I miss a single moment of a precious and wonderful life. It's a story that stuck with me, and one I honestly believe is a masterpiece. Best game me and my wife played separately, together. Tears of the Kingdom. Breath of the Wild, when it was released back in 2017, was a big departure for the Legend of Zelda series. Both me and my wife are huge fans of traditional linear Zelda games, having played through most of the series together over the past few years, and it was definitely a bit of a shock seeing the series take such a bold departure from what it had been before. Breath of the Wild was, for me, my favourite Zelda game that I had no interest in replaying. Unlike past entries in the series, a lot of the appeal of the game was exploration of the unknown. It was a magical game to experience for the first time, but on repeat playthroughs, some of that magic was undoubtedly diluted. Once the novelty of exploring a boundless open world was gone, and the magic of seeing a game like this run on a handheld was gone, so was some of the charm. For a long time, I was concerned that I might not enjoy Tears of the Kingdom upon its release. A direct sequel to Breath of the Wild, set in the same world, felt like a concept that might struggle to be enjoyable for me. If the world was unchanged, and the novelty of exploration was gone, would I still enjoy the game as much as my first Breath of the Wild playthrough? I was quickly proven wrong. Tears of the Kingdom took the world of Breath of the Wild, a basic world that relied on exploration novelty and consistent physics rules for its spectacle, and filled it with infinitely more content to experience. It reimagined dungeons as more visually diverse and narratively significant spaces, expanded the story to make its champions feel more involved in the world's quest, introduced a wild new series of tools for world navigation, created an entire underground second map and large number of sky islands to explore, created more lengthy and involved quest chains, and basically used the existing world to tell a much more densely packed story. Having played Tears of the Kingdom, Breath of the Wild feels like a trial run. Breath of the Wild walked so that Tears of the Kingdom could run. Me and my wife didn't do a shared playthrough of Tears of the Kingdom. We each separately poured well over 100 hours into our adventures, playing beside each other over weeks, sharing our stories of discoveries and quietly enjoying an adventure, taken together, that over time we could discuss when we reached shareable milestones. It was parallel play, sharing space, doing the same thing, separately, and enjoying that experience. Tears of the Kingdom is the most invested I've ever been in a true open-world adventure game, and I can't wait to someday explore it all over again. Also, this game let me fuse a skeleton arm onto the Master Sword and beat people over the head with it, and that's Game of the Year material to me. Game that made me feel unexpectedly competent. Street Fighter VI. I suck at playing traditional fighting games. I love them, conceptually. I really do enjoy digging into the strategy of fighting games and the unique mechanics of fighters, but all too often there are barriers that prevent me from actually enjoying playing cool-looking fighting games. I have two major issues when playing most fighting games: input complexity and memory recall. I struggle in combo-heavy fighting games to remember input strings for special moves, and even when I can remember them, I struggle to accurately and reliably input precise combo sequences, particularly when under pressure in combat. This is why Street Fighter VI introducing modern controls, a new control scheme similar in execution to the Super Smash Bros. Series, was such an exciting part of this year for me. Button inputs in modern mode are reduced down to light, medium, heavy, and special attack buttons, with directional modifiers used to select specific specials. You lose a little top-end character potential, but in exchange are able to much more simply access the vast majority of a character's toolset. Modern control mode in Street Fighter VI does a great job of balancing reduced input recall and execution complexity with character moveset functionality retention, and went a huge way to making Street Fighter VI actually playable for me in any kind of serious way. The game has a really enjoyable and elaborate story mode that does a great job of introducing character movesets and playstyles gently over time, and a really fun roster of base characters. It's nice to get to feel competent in a Street Fighter game, after years of not really being able to keep up with the series in any kind of serious competitive sense. Best cooking-centered narrative. Vemba. Vemba is a masterpiece, and I really don't want to say too much about it in advance of recommending it. It's short, it's beautiful, and a really easy recommendation. Please trust me and just go and play it. If you need to know a little bit more, Vemba is a narrative adventure game about a pair of South Indian parents who move to Canada and attempt to raise a child together in Toronto. Narrative segments are separated by Cooking Mama-style minigames with a twist. You're working from an old recipe book that's damaged, missing information, and sometimes a little hard to pass. Cooking is a process of discovery as much as it is executing steps laid out by another. The game does a wonderful job of treating food as a tool for exploration and connection with others, and exploring a story about the ties we feel to others when we try to keep traditions alive. Vber as a game isn't afraid to trust the player to make inferences, and tell narrative wordlessly through environmental storytelling with a nuance that very few games are confident enough to work with. Every scene is crafted exquisitely, and that ability to resist beating the player over the head with certain plot points is a huge credit to this game's quality. Vber is stunning, and I don't want to say much more. Play it. It's something truly special with so many twists and little details that I really loved. Best game of 2023 I haven't finished yet. Boulders Gate 3. So yeah, this is where I admit that I haven't actually finished Boulders Gate 3 yet. Far from it. I have loved what I've played, but I keep trying to play it between other work obligations, and it's a game that I really think deserves me playing it in some big undistracted play sessions. It's probably going to be the big game that I sink time into over the festive period this year. Boulders Gate 3 is a Dungeons & Dragons based adventure game that is hugely impressive in how it allows the player to get creative within its rule set. Not since Disco Elysium have I played an RPG that felt so much like I could truly play a role of my own and skirt around expected rules to have an adventure that felt like it anticipated any wild choice I might try to make within it. It's a little disorienting to play at times as someone who plays 5th edition weekly in a campaign that has made a lot of homebrew changes over time to the world. Seeing mind flayers as exclusively and inherently evil is kind of funny when I've played a vegan illithid chef in the not-so-distant past in a campaign, but the character writing and voice acting performances, alongside the open-ended gameplay systems, work to make Boulders Gate 3 a very special game indeed. I really do intend to finish it. I'm gonna play more of it. Best game of 2023 that made me undergo emotional whiplash between horny and trauma? Stray Gods, the roleplay musical. Stray Gods, the roleplay musical, is a wonderfully creative choose-your-own-adventure game musical in which players control Grace, a woman in her early 20s who has 1 week to prove she didn't murder Calliope, the last muse to the Greek gods, after Calliope turns up dead in her apartment. I could go into depth about my love for Stray Gods and how it uses musical numbers to put timing pressure on difficult, nuanced conversations to great effect, but I also think I could boil down my love to the game to 2 extremes: horny and trauma. Look, I'll be honest, a big part of my love for Stray Gods is down to how good of a job that game did at making me want to bang a whole bunch of these mythical beings. I'm usually only into women, and don't get me wrong, this game has a whole bunch of really, really, really good women that are very much my taste, but damn, Pan, damn, I wanted Pan to be the best terrible decision I could ever make. Oh, Pan. That said, as much as I spent most of my time in Stray Gods flirting my way to success, I do want to talk a bit about one scene in the game, one that I think Stray Gods does a disservice by not better contextualizing in the game's content warnings. Some light spoilers for Stray Gods ahead. There is a scene in Stray Gods where, at least in my playthrough, I was roped into the death of a god. That god had undoubtedly experienced a lot of trauma in their past, and had worked out that if they die and reincarnate into a new form, it would take around 20 years before their new host started remembering all of their traumatic memories. This was a party centered around a person that, depending on your perspective, was either engaging in suicide or euthanasia in order to escape trauma that felt impossible for them to overcome. That scene was incredibly tough to experience, particularly in a game that had otherwise been pretty light-hearted. It was a heavy topic to put in players' hands, and an even heavier topic to put the outcome of into player control. That scene, as much as it caught me off guard and was difficult to process, I'm really not happy I played it on stream and had to process that in front of an audience. It was really well handled. I think it was handled with a lot of respect, and both ways that that scene can play out feel like they avoid putting responsibility onto the player's shoulders. It is a complicated scene with no real good answers, and I find it really interesting in hindsight thinking that scene through, even if it was a bit of a whiplash to go from flirting with a god to suddenly, how do I classify this person's death and how do I feel about it in the context of it being a solution to feelings of trauma that are just going to resurface for their next host. It's a complicated question to have sandwiched in between moments of horny. Stray Gods is a fun, flirty, creative adventure, but it's also brutally dark and heavy at times, and the ability to be both of those things without either compromising the overall tone is impressive. It's a fantastic game, even if it's hard to process horny and trauma that close to each other. Most unexpectedly hopeful apocalypse simulator. Goodbye Volcano High. Goodbye Volcano High is a game about dinosaur teens facing the end of the world together. A narrative adventure game, broken up occasionally with music rhythm sections, it follows a group of friends going into their final year of school and trying to plan for their futures, as the looming threat of an approaching asteroid slowly morphs from an abstract concern to an imminent catastrophe. How do you plan for your future when you have no guarantee you'll be alive a year or two from now? How do you think about the long term when it feels like the planet's long-term prospects aren't promising? How do you plan for the future when mounting dread locks you into a growing paralysis? Goodbye Volcano High is a game that is, narratively, very much of today. Starting development in 2020, it's clear that the game was born in the shadow of COVID-19, at a time where people couldn't travel to be with their loved ones as terrifying news was sweeping the globe. But the story is told in such a way, its themes can be applied to a whole variety of modern impending crises, and the impact that they're having globally on our hope for our planet's future. A game like Goodbye Volcano High could easily have been incredibly depressing to play, and it certainly does have its dark and unflinching moments of despair, but at the end of the day, it's a story with a surprising amount of hope. It's a story about sticking together through tough times, making sure you're not alone when the worst is on its way, and about not letting a limited number of days stop you from chasing your dreams with the time that you do have. Filled with a charming cast of diverse queer nerdy characters, and a wonderfully executed art direction, I couldn't get enough of this game. It made me feel hope, something hard to do when reminding me of how often it feels like our world is kind of fucked. Best, it's a Dark Souls. Lies of P. Lies of P is, to put it simply, Pinocchio Bloodborne. You're a robot made by Geppetto, unique in your ability to lie, an ability not shared by the automatons of the world you inhabit. A plague is impacting the human population, the robots are rebelling against their masters, and you need to fight your way through them to try and save this dark, Victorian-esque city from its impending doom. Lies of P is an incredibly satisfying game to play, and while it does heavily lean on From Software's work for inspiration, it has a few interesting ideas of its own. Players are encouraged to block rather than dodge, with perfect blocks incurring no damage. An imperfect block incurs hypothetical damage, which can be undone by attacking the enemy in retaliation, encouraging an aggressive style of play similar to that seen in Bloodborne, with its health recovery via damage dealing mechanics. The game also features some really interesting mechanics for disassembling and reassembling weapon handles and blades to create new combinations, which lends a lot to the sense of ownership of combat builds. Lies of P is a fantastic game, one of the best outside of From Software's own work. And it's a blast to play while listening to the opening title music from Shadow the Hedgehog on loop. Trust me on that, it makes every boss fight way better. It fits the kind of cheesy tone of the game perfectly. Best game that I was least surprised was good. SpiderMan II. SpiderMan II is basically more Spider-Man. Everything I loved about the first game and the Miles Morales sequel is turned up to 11. It's great that there's now a cool wingsuit for gliding, and there's more combat options, and the story's more emotionally engaging, and that the scale of the adventure's ramped up. But it's more Spider-Man. Did you like Spider-Man and Miles Morales? This is more of that, and that's great. It keeps most of the accessibility support from the first two games, and added some extra tools, which was a welcome positive. It's basically just more of the same. I wasn't surprised that this was good. I loved it. I thought it was a really neat step up, but I wasn't surprised. This is one of my favourite games of the year, and there's basically nothing non-spoilery that I really need to say about it. You'll know if it's going to be for you. Did you like the other Spider-Man? Then play this, it's more Spider-Man. Highest creativity per minute ratio. Super Mario Wonder. From 1 minute to the next, I never knew what Super Mario Wonder was going to throw at me. No idea in this game overstayed its welcome, and every idea felt fresh. Mario Wonder is a 2D side-scrolling Mario game absolutely overflowing with creativity. Levels generally have unique gimmicks, with enemies or stage layouts often not repeated after a single stage, and a wild amount of ways that it twists its core gameplay. Every level contains a Wonder Seed, an item which wildly shifts the rules of play for a limited time, creating new challenges for the player to overcome. From shifting the game's perspective, to turning off gravity, to stretching Mario's limbs, to turning the level into a trip through the stars, or turning the player into a sticky pink blob, every Wonder Seed has something different to throw at the player, and every gameplay shift feels equally polished in its execution. Mario Wonder is a showcase of unbridled creativity, and I never knew what it was going to throw at me next. Best game that's kind of a mess like its protagonist. Thirsty Suitors. Thirsty Suitors is a lot of things at once. It's a dating sim, a turn-based RPG, a cooking sim, a skateboarding game, and a relationship repair adventure all wrapped into one. It's sometimes a little messy, but I think that's okay. You play as Jaya, a woman in her early 20s returning to her hometown to try and make things right with her family, friends, and exes. After running away from her life in an impulsive moment, it's the story of her trying to fix the wrongs of her past and make things right with people who have every right not to forgive her. It's basically Scott Pilgrim if Ramona had conversations with her exes rather than getting Scott to fight them for her. At its core, Thirsty Suitors is a game focused on narrative choices and turn-based battles, with people that Jaya has wronged in the past. Players can inflict status effects by recognizing emotional vulnerabilities in character dialogue and exploiting them with specific taunts targeting types of emotions. Each boss fight with someone from Jaya's past ultimately evolves into a genuine conversation about flawed teenage romance, with nobody coming off as faultless in the post-mortem of what was. Thirsty Suitors does an amazing job of fleshing out each past partner and relationship in such a way that it is very understandable why each upset party did the things that they did, and why they were hurt by what was done to them. Nobody is entirely blameless, and mutual fault has to be acknowledged to move forward and heal. The game uses its cooking minigames to great effect as a barrier of distance, and as an activity to facilitate conversations with Jaya's parents, which explore their pasts and open up insights on how they became the parents they are today. There's skateboarding, it's janky but fine enough. There's a lesbian aunt, she's pretty fucking rad. Thirsty Suitors is a beautiful tale of generational trauma, and the ways that trauma can lead to poor decision-making in young adulthood. It's a story of making things right and healing, whether that looks like an uneasy truce, a second try at friendship, or pursuing a relationship that used to be. It's a story of the hurt we cause without meaning to, or without thinking of the consequences, and what repairing trust entails. Thirsty Suitors is a beautiful game, and one I highly recommend. It's a little messy and awkward in places, but worth the work anyway, much like the relationships that Jaya is putting in the work to repair. Game of the Year that half of you will hate. In Stars and Time. Okay, I said I was unsure if I was going to crown a singular Game of the Year overall in this video, and I am, and I know it's one that half of you are going to justifiably hate playing. In Stars and Time is a turn-based RPG in which you play as Sifrin, a member of an adventuring party on your way to save the world. You're not the main character, destined to save the world with unique powers to resist the evil king. You're the third out of 4 party members picked up along the way during an adventure, not even around for the full narrative. You're a wizard and a trap disarmer, and the party member who gets sent first into dangerous rooms. The game starts one day before the end of the world. You've collected all the gems needed to access the final dungeon, and have limited time to stop the king freezing the world in time and darkness. You've got one final town to explore, and one 3-floor dungeon to complete. You die on your first attempt at the dungeon, and wake up at the start of the previous day. Nobody else in the party remembers that you're in a time loop. Only you can save the world by dying until you learn enough to make victory achievable. In Stars and Time uses its time loop feature in some really interesting ways, both mechanically and narratively. Sifrin is the only party member who remembers the past time loops, so is the only party member gaining experience through random battles. Information learned in past loops can be applied to future loops. Party members can be taught skills that they haven't leveled up enough to naturally learn, via a nudge of a memory that you have but they do not. Combat is pretty simple, using an active time battle system with a very literal rock, paper, scissors advantage system to deal damage. Special attacks and spells don't cost mana or energy to use, but each have cooldowns of a number of turns, slowing down their reuse. You can skip some players' turns to jump faster to a different character and get their cooldown to reset more quickly, such as if you need to get your healer back to healing a little faster, you might skip a couple of combat turns from more combat-focused characters to get that cooldown on the healer to, finish up quicker. The game's biggest strength, in my eyes, is its narrative. The core cast of characters is incredibly endearing, which is a relief given how much the game is experiencing the same events with them over and over again. There's also a really strong emphasis on world building, with a particular highlight being the way that the setting's religious belief in change is used to wonderful effect to build out other aspects of the world, such as LGBTQIA+ inclusivity. Seeing the change religion used, for example, to set up people in the setting typically having multiple names, meaning that if they change gender they might already have a new name prepared to swap to, made queer inclusivity feel baked into the consequences of the world itself and its beliefs. So, why do I think some of you will hate this game? Simple. Repetition. This game gets repetitive. It does so deliberately, and knowingly, to make a point. It gets to the point where, for a while, you'll be replaying large portions of this game and making very little progress. It will be frustrating, and at times it will feel unrewarding. You'll be stripped of the reward of new conversations with your friends, and at times it might feel like progressing further isn't worth it. It is important that the game does this. The game's ending hours are truly phenomenal, one of the best endings of a game I've ever experienced. It wouldn't be the masterpiece it is without that frustrating repetition. But if you have a lower tolerance for repetition than I do, you might well reach a point where you just stop having fun playing, and you're not wrong if you feel that way. I feel like the payoff is worth it, and I feel like it is really important that this game kind of frustrate you, but it's still a game that expects you to put up with itself getting less fun to make a point, and that's not often an easy trade-off to justify. In Stars and Time is my game of the year. I know many people who cannot stand it. It's not an easy recommendation, but this little indie gem is one of the most impactful games I've played in years, and I want to give it this year's biggest award, even knowing that a bunch of you will be justified in hating your time with it. So there we go, Game of the Year, we did it. That was a list. I did pick a final one in the end, but here's the thing, if you asked me on any other day what that final one is, my ultimate game of the year might have changed. I'm no good at sticking with just one. This year had a bunch of cool games, you now know about them. Have a good festive period, I'm off to not work for a couple of weeks. Goodbye.